Hello, this is Shmuel Moshe, and you are listening to the Weekly Parashahcast Season 2, the show where I read the Tanakh and provide my own interpretations of what I think it all means. This week's episode lands on the 1st of Adar 5785, March 1st, 2025. It is the weekly portion for Terumah, but for us, we are going to be listening or reading through chapters 7 through 9 of Samuel 1, Shmuel 1. You could follow along in English via Chabad.org. I'll be jumping ahead right in, but first, a reminder, as always, I'm not a professional scholar, just somebody who wanted to study the scripture. Let's go ahead and begin chapter 7, verse 1 of Shmuel 1. And the men of Kiriath Yarim came and took up the ark of the Lord, and brought it to the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. And they designated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. And it was from that day the ark was stationed in Kiriath Yarim, that the time ran on to 20 years, and all the houses of Israel were drawn after the Lord. And Samuel said to all the house of Israel, saying, If with all your heart you are returning to the Lord, remove the foreign gods from your midst, and the Ashtaroth, and direct your heart toward the Lord, and serve him alone, and he will save you from the hand of the Philistines. And the children of Israel removed the Baalim and the Ashtaroth, and served the Lord alone. And Samuel said, Gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I shall pray to the Lord on your behalf. And they assembled at Mizpah, and drew water, and poured it out before the Lord. And they fasted on that day, and said there, We have sinned to the Lord. And Samuel judged the children of Israel in Mizpah. Now the Philistines heard that the children of Israel had assembled at Mizpah, and the lords of the Philistines went up against Israel. And the children of Israel heard, and they were afraid of the Philistines. And the children of Israel said to Samuel, Cease not to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he save us from the hand of the Philistines. And Samuel took one sucking lamb, and offered it up as a burnt offering, entirely to the Lord. And Samuel cried out to the Lord on behalf of Israel, and the Lord answered him. And as Samuel was offering up the burnt offering, the Philistines drew near for war against Israel. And the Lord thundered with a loud noise on that day upon the Philistines, and threw them into a panic, and they were beaten before Israel. And the men of Israel went forth from Mizpah, and pursued the Philistines, and harassed them until they were below Beth-kar. And Samuel took one stone, and placed it between Mizpah and the peak, Shen, and he called its name Ebenezer. For he said, Hitherto the Lord has helped us. And the Philistines were subdued, and they came no more into the border of Israel. And the hand of the Lord was upon the Philistines all the day of Samuel. And the cities which the Philistines had taken from Israel were restored to Israel, from Ekron to Gath, and their border Israel delivered from the hand of the Philistines, and there was peace between Israel and the Amorites. And Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and from year to year he would set forth, and go around to Bethel, and Gilgal, and Mizpah, and he would judge Israel in all these places. And his return was to Ramah, for there was his house, and there he judged Israel, and he built an altar to the Lord. All right, end of chapter 7. So this is a quick retelling of what took place after the Ark of the Covenant was recovered from the Philistines. As we may recall from last time, the Philistines took the Ark after it was unsuccessfully used in battle, and as they kept it hostage, things kept going wrong for them. So they said, we need to get this thing out of here, it's cursing us. And they sent it back to the land of Israel, and then it was... And so once the cows pulled it into town, the people who looked upon it were all celebrating, but then they also were put to death because they looked at the Holy Ark. But in any case, the people of Kiriath Yarim took the Ark, and it says it was brought to the house of Abinadab, and they left Eleazar, his son, to guard the Ark. And so from there, it lasted 20 years, and during that time, the people were all drawn to the Lord, right? So they were brought back to God in this time span. And so Samuel tells them, if you really mean it, if you're sincere about your returning to God, then get rid of all of those idols and all the things related to idols in your home, and direct your heart toward the Lord. Serve God alone, and he will save you. And so, sure enough, everybody gathers around, and they gather at Mizpah, and they start acknowledging that what they've done wrong and that they're returning to God, and everybody's there together, all of Israel. And suddenly the Philistines show up to go to war against Israel, and the Israelites are like, oh, please, call out to God for us, Samuel. Do us a favor, because we're in trouble. and he makes an offering and he calls out, and sure enough, God delivers and he terrifies the Philistines with a thunderstorm. And then the Israelites overtake them and push them back, and outside of the land of Israel's border, they are kept at bay. So with this success, woohoo, the Philistines are done. It also says that the peace between Israel and the Amorites there was. And from there, Samuel judges Israel all the days of his life, and it talks about how he would go from year to year all around from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah and be a judge there. And then he would go home to Ramah where he lived and then judge there as well, and he built an altar to the Lord. So that concludes that chapter. It's fairly straightforward. It's kind of a good story. It's a good thing. It's like, hey, look, everything worked out. People returned to God, and of course Samuel was able to do his job as a judge. Now we move on to chapter 8, verse 1 of Shmuel 1. And it was when Samuel had grown old that he appointed his sons judges for Israel. And the names of his firstborn was Joel, and the second, Abijah. And they were judges in Beersheba. And his sons did not walk in his ways, and they turned after gain, and they took bribes and perverted justice. And all the elders of Israel gathered and came to Samuel to Ramah. And they said to him, Behold, you have grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now set up for us a king to judge us like all the nations. And the thing was displeasing in the eyes of Samuel when they said, Give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Listen to the voice of the people, according to all that they will say to you. For they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from reigning over them. Like all the deeds which they have done from the day I brought them up from Egypt, and until this day, they forsook me and served other gods, so are they doing to you. And now listen to their voice, except that you shall warn them, and tell them the manner of the king who will reign over them. And Samuel related all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him of a king. And he said, This will be the manner of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to him for his chariots and for his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. And he will appoint them to him commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and to plow his plowing and reap his harvest, and to make his weapons and to make equipment for his chariots. And he will take your daughters for his perfumers, for cooks, and for bakers. And he will take the best of your fields, for your vineyards, and your olive trees, and will give them to his slaves. And he will tithe your grain crops and your vineyards, and he will give them to his officers and his slaves. And he will take your male and female slaves, and your handsomest youths and your asses, and put them to his work. And he will tithe your flocks, and you will be slaves to him. And you will cry out on that day, because of your king, whom you will have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not answer you on that day. And the people refused to listen to Samuel's voice, and they said, No, but there shall be a king over us, and also we shall be like all the nations, and our king will judge us, go forth before us, and wage our wars. And Samuel heard all the words of the people, and he spoke to them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, Listen to their voice, and you shall make them a king. And Samuel said to the men of Israel, Go, every man to his city. End of chapter 8. So here we have it. It's the end of Samuel's life. He's growing old, or at least later on in his life, and his sons have come up and been appointed as judges, but unfortunately his sons, much like Eli's sons, they follow in the same path. They deviate from what is righteous, they pursue gain, they take bribes, they pervert justice, and it's a bad situation. They say to him, the elders of Israel say, Look, you're old and your sons do not walk in your ways, so we want a king. Give us a king, because all the other nations have kings, so we want a king, and the king will be our judge. And Samuel does not like this. It says this is displeasing in his eyes, so he talks to God, and God says, Listen, they have not rejected you, but they rejected me from reigning over them. In other words, they don't want me as their king, so they're going to ask for a mortal king. And they've always been this way. Like all the things they've done ever since Egypt, now they're doing the same thing to you by rejecting your ways. So listen to them, but also warn them. Tell them all the things that are going to happen when they have a king. So, this is the kind of guy who's going to be in charge. He's going to take your children for his armies. He's going to take your daughters, put all of them to work doing all sorts of things, from plowing to perfuming to baking. They're going to Not just that, take the best of your field. He's going to take the best of your crops. He's going to feed them to his officers and his slaves. He's going to take the best of your slaves and put them to his work. He's going to tithe all of your things, and you will be his slaves. And you're going to cry out, and you're going to ask for help, but guess what? I'm not going to answer. Okay? That's your warning. And they say, no, but there shall be a king over us, and also we shall be like all the nations, and our king will judge us. Go forth before us, and wage our wars. And so that's basically it. Over and over, they insist like they want a king. They're going to have a king. And unfortunately, this is the fate they have chosen for themselves. So now they are going to get what they ask for. And the Lord tells them, listen to their voice and you shall make them a king. And he tells them, go home, basically. Now we're going to get into chapter 9, verse 1, Shmuel 1. Now there was a man of Benjamin, and his name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the son of Bechorat, the son of Aphiah, the son of a Benjamite man, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Saul. And he was young and handsome, there being no one of the children of Israel handsomer than he. From his shoulders and upwards he was taller than any of the people. Now the she-asses of Kish, Saul's father, became lost, and Kish said to Saul his son, Now take one of the servants, and arise and go, seek the she-asses. And he passed through Mount Ephraim, and he passed through the land of Shalishah, and they did not find them. And they passed through the land of Shalim, and they were not there. And he passed through the land of Benjamin, and they did not find them. When they had come into the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who was with him, Come, let us return, lest my father cease to worry about the she-asses, and come to worry about us. And he said to him, Behold, a man of God is in this city, and the man is held in high esteem. Everything which he speaks surely comes to pass. Now let us go there. Perhaps he will tell us our way upon which we have gone. And Saul said to his servant, And behold, if we go, what shall we bring to the man? For the bread is used up from our vessels, and there is no present to bring the man of God. What have we? The lad answered Saul again, and said, Behold, I have in my possession 1/4 of a shekel of silver, and I shall give it to the man of God, that he may tell us our way. Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he would say thus, Come, let us go to the seer. For he who is called a prophet today was formerly called a seer. And Saul said to his servant, Well said. Come, let us go. And they went to the city where the man of God was. As they were going up to the ascent of the city, they found young maidens coming out to draw water. And they said to them, Is the seer here? And they answered them and said, He is. Behold, he is before you. Hurry now, for today he is come to the city, for the people will have the sacrifice of the day in the high place. When you come to the city, straightway you will find him, before he ascends the high place to eat. For the people will not eat until he comes, for he will bless the sacrifice, and afterwards the invited guests will eat. Now go up, for at this time you will find him. And they went up to the city, as they were coming into the midst of the city, and behold, Samuel was coming out toward them, to ascend the high place. Now the Lord had revealed to Samuel one day before Saul's coming, saying, At this time tomorrow I shall send to you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him to be a ruler of my people Israel, and he will save my people from the hand of the Philistines, for I have looked upon my people, for their cry has come to me. And Samuel saw Saul, and the Lord said to him, Behold, the man about whom I said to you, This one will rule over my people. And Saul approached Samuel inside the gate, and said, Tell me now, which is the house of the seer? And Samuel answered Saul, and said, I am the seer, and you shall eat with me today, and I shall send you away in the morning, and all that is on your mind I shall tell you. And concerning the she-asses which are lost to you, and you have sought them as of today, 3 days do not take them to heart, for they have been found. And to whom does all that is desirable in Israel belong? Is it not to you and to your father's house? And Saul answered and said, Am I not a Benjamite of the smallest of the tribes of Israel, and my family the least of all the families of Benjamin? Now why have you spoken to me after this manner? And Samuel took Saul and his servant, and brought them into the chamber, and he gave them a place at the head of the invited guests, who were about 30 men. And Samuel said to the cook, Give the portion which I gave you, of which I said to you, Keep it with you. And the cook raised up the thigh and that which was upon it, and placed it before Saul, whereupon he said, Behold, that which has been reserved. Place it before you and eat, because for the appointed time it is reserved for you, by saying, I have invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel on that day. And they descended from the high place to the city, and he spoke with Saul on the roof. And they arose early, and it was dawn, that Samuel called Saul to the roof, saying, Arise, and I shall escort you. And Saul arose, and they went out, both of them, he and Samuel, into the street. As they were going down at the outskirts of the city, Samuel said to Saul, Tell the servant to go ahead of us. And he went ahead. And you, stand still at this time, and I shall let you hear the word of God. All right, so that's the end of chapter 9. We get to meet our new king, Saul. Chapter 9. So it opens up telling us about this man from the tribe of Benjamin, a son of Kish, son of Abiel, Zeror, Bechorat, Aphiah of Benjamin. And he's a mighty man of power. He's got a son named Saul, who's young and handsome, very tall. And his father loses, right? So Kish loses his donkeys. He's got these female donkeys that have gone missing. So he sends out his son Saul, along with a servant, to go find him. And they go searching and searching and searching all throughout Benjamin, and they just never find these things. So when they get to Zuph, he says to his servant, Let's get back home so that my dad doesn't start worrying about us rather than the donkeys. And the servant says, Behold, right now in this town, in this city here, there is a man who is truly, truly in touch with the divine. Everything he says comes true. So maybe he can tell us which way to go. And Saul says, oh, that's great and all, but what do we have to give the guy? We've got no food left. Everything of ours is pretty much used up. And the servant says, but I've got 1/4 of a silver shekel here, so I can give him this, and that will be our offering. And he's like, all right, good enough. Let's go and see the seer. And because it says here at the time, we call them prophets now, but they were called seers back then, which is, you might call them an oracle, a seer. So this is the language used once upon a time. Now, with that being said, they go and they search for him. These women are coming out to draw water, and they ask, is the seer here? And the women tell him outright, yes, go this way. Be quick about it. You go straight and you'll find him. So as they go in, Saul encounters Samuel, and Samuel, as he's coming down, recalls that the day before God told him that tomorrow you're going to get the guy who's being put in charge. Your king is arriving tomorrow. So he's going to be from the tribe of Benjamin, and you'll know him when you see him, is basically what he tells him. So when he sees him, God says, behold, that man which I told you about, this is him. And so when they ask, hey, which is the house of the seer? Samuel tells him, I'm the seer, and you are my guests. And tomorrow I'll send you away, but everything you need to know, I'll tell you. And as far as the donkeys go, they've already been found, so great. But tell me, to whom does all that is desirable in Israel belong? Is it not to you and to your father's house? And Saul is confused by this because he is of the tribe of Benjamin, which is a small tribe, and also his family is a small family. So he's curious, like, why are you saying that to me? I'm certainly not what you just said. But nevertheless, they are taken as guests, and Samuel had the cook set aside a specific portion for who would ever show up, and it happened to be Saul. So he has the cook present that which has been reserved, place it before you and eat, because for the appointed time it is reserved for you. I have invited the people. So Saul ate with Samuel on that day. Now I'm going to go ahead and say that this is a very significant verse. Behold that which has been reserved. So in other words, the land of Israel, right? This meal is like a metaphor. That which has been reserved, place it before you and eat, right? So in other words, take it, because for the appointed time it is reserved for you. So, again, the land of Israel is yours. The people of Israel are yours to lead. You are the king. I have invited the people. So these 30 people, again, this is also sort of like gathering the people before him. So it's just a taste of what's to come, literally. With that being said, after they descend from the high place down to the city, so they go from the holy place down to the city, and he talks to Saul on the roof, and he tells him, when you get up in the morning, I'll take you home. And sure enough, the next morning, he's like, arise and I'll escort you. But while we're going, tell the servant to go ahead. I need to tell you something. Okay, I'm going to tell you the word of God. And that is where we get to our conclusion for this week's episode. So now we know who is the guy. And it's interesting, Saul is aware and discerning. You see a couple of things, like how does he handle the search? He gives it a proper search, but then he also keeps in mind, will my father not be worried about us rather than the donkeys? And, his ability to take counsel. I mean, he's not a stupid guy, and he seems to be quite a character, albeit this is us just meeting him for the first time. So let's look forward to learning more about him in future episode. But for now, that's it for this week. I will bring up, attention to detail here. Every time the people go astray, and every time, eventually, with a judge and with God's help, they come back and are redeemed from their hardship. But despite all this, the people of Israel just so desperately want to be like everyone else. We want to be like all the nations. Make us like they are. I want to be like they are. Well, that's obviously the problem. So now in doing so, we have reached a point of, I don't want to say calamity, but it's certainly trouble. And now we know, no matter what it is, God wants to set this people apart, but they insist on being like everyone else. And now, rather than having the very good deal which they always had, which is follow the commandments that you promised you'd follow, and you will have wonderful things at all times, they demand to have a king, even though they are warned, like, the king is going to do bad stuff. You're going to have to, it's going to come with a price. And they say, we'll have a king anyway. We want to be like everybody else. Okay, so be it. So it's just a very interesting thing, this tendency amongst the people of Israel to want to be like everyone else and to copy everyone else with their worship of idols. They never, I want to set you aside is what God says. And they say, no, but we want to be like everyone else. And why? Why are they like this? Well, you could say it's the influence of nearby neighbors, but ultimately that is the problem. People cannot embrace what they should be embracing. They refuse to adhere to the tenets, and so it costs them everything. Until next time, this is Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you'll tune in next time. Until then, as always, Baruch Hashem.